In the winter of 1306, the town of Arras burned its light low, as if the year itself had grown tired of shining. The chimneys coughed black smoke into a sky already fading into ash. Inside the cooper's house, the fire had long since died, and no one stirred. Corentin, son of a barrel maker, stood alone in the chapel at the edge of the village. The air inside was bitter with cold, and older still with mold and forgotten incense. The crucifix above the altar was split through the chest, and wax from last year's candles had hardened in yellow puddles across the stone. It was not a holy place. Not anymore. His hands built for hooping wood and hammering staves, shook as he placed a single brass pilgrim's shell upon the cracked altar. The shell was dull, scratched from years spent hanging on his father's cloak, now long buried. It was no offering. Only a symbol. A promise. His child had died 3 weeks earlier. A fever, quick and cruel, had burned through the boy's body like a brush fire through dry straw. His cries had turned hoarse, then still. When it was done, his skin was cold, his lips blue. His mother had not wept. She had only wrapped the boy in linen and turned her face to the wall, where she had kept it ever since. Corentin could not speak her name any more. Could not remember the taste of her voice. So he walked to the chapel. And he swore to God, not loudly, not like the stories of knights on campaign or holy men in cathedrals, but quietly, the way grief demands, that he would walk to Rome. He would lay his suffering at the feet of saints whose bones remembered miracles. He would ask nothing but this, that someone, somewhere, see his pain and know it for what it was, love, lost. He left the next morning before the sun could fully rise. The frost still clung to the cart tracks. The fields were brittle underfoot. No one saw him go. Not even her. He carried a staff of birch, a sack with a crust of bread, a flint, 2 shirts, and a leather-bound psalter with a broken clasp. He wore a plain woolen cloak and boots that had already begun to crack. On his breast, he pinned the same brass shell. This time, as his own. The road south was slow and narrow. It wound through woods that whispered in dialects he did not know. In the first days, he passed other pilgrims, old women with rosaries, children riding mules, men with canes carved with foreign saints. They shared food, sometimes stories, sometimes only silence. But as the days passed, their numbers thinned. Winter pressed down, and with it, hunger. The bread turned stale, then gone. The earth turned hard. His feet bled. The ache in his legs became a rhythm. His prayer, Domin dirige me, Lord, guide me, lost its urgency and became instead a murmur, then a memory. He no longer walked toward something. He simply walked. At night, he lay beneath hedgerows or in ruined barns, listening to the wind scrape across the stones. The world had quieted, as though waiting. Not for spring. But for surrender. One evening, deep in the woods near Cambrai, he watched snow fall through the branches, each flake a slow feather drifting toward the earth. He thought of his son's breath, the last one, as it left his small chest and vanished into the air. He tried to remember the boy's laugh. He could not. Grief does not scream. It seeps. It bleaches the edges of memory until all that's left is shape, without voice. Corentin did not cry. He tightened the belt at his waist and walked on, leaving no tracks in the snow behind him. The first red mark appeared on a wooden door beneath a crumbling thatch. A crude X, hastily brushed in something thick. Corentin passed it without pause. By the time he saw the 5th mark, he knew what it was. The wind had shifted. The smell came with it, not rot, not yet. But the sour tang of sickness. Old wool, spoiled meat, wet stone. The scent of people who had locked their doors not for safety, but for death. The village had no name. Or perhaps it once did, but none of the mouths here remembered how to shape it. Corentin entered at dusk, when the sky above the forest glowed with the last violet light of day. He walked the single road, narrow as a sheep's path, past homes with windows shuttered from within. There was no smoke in the air. No dogs barked. No lamps burned. Only one building stood open, a church of stone, roof half collapsed, its bell rope chewed through by time. Inside, an old friar stirred ashes in a hearth that had long gone cold. He looked up as Corentin entered, and for a moment, something like recognition flickered across his face. "Pilgrim," the friar said. His voice was low, as though afraid to wake the air itself. Corentin bowed his head. "They don't pray here," the friar continued. "Not since the fever came. Not since the children stopped waking." Corentin sat by the hearth, though there was no heat. His limbs ached. His feet throbbed in his boots. He did not speak. That night, he shared a bowl of water-thin broth. He watched candlelight tremble on the friar's brow, saw the man's hands shake as he folded them for a prayer neither of them said aloud. Before sleep, Corentin lit the small stub of tallow he carried and opened his psalter. The words blurred. He stared at the page until the wax guttered and died. In the dark, he dreamt of a wooden cradle, rocking gently, though no hand touched it. The next morning, the friar walked with him to the edge of the village. The sun was not yet up, but frost gleamed on every roof, every bare branch, every locked door. "They are still alive," the friar whispered. "Most of them. But they have already buried their voices." Corentin looked at the houses. He imagined families huddled in silence, listening for coughs, for footsteps, for the closing of a door that would not open again. He thought of his wife, the way she had turned her face to the wall. It was the same silence. "They are waiting to die," the friar said. "But they have forgotten how to mourn." A crow broke the silence above them, cawing from a gnarled tree. The sound was obscene. Too loud for this place. Corentin nodded once and turned south again. He walked until the sound of the village fell behind him like snow sliding from a roof. That night, alone in the woods, he dreamed of a procession, men, women, children, all dressed in grey, walking into the sea without a word. When he woke, his cheek was damp, though he did not know whether from the mist or from tears. The mountains did not rise. They waited. Pale and motionless, they loomed against the southern sky, jagged as broken teeth, white as a priest's funeral vestment. Corentin reached the first foothills by mid-January. Snow had already swallowed the lower paths. Birds had fled. Even the wolves kept to deeper places. He walked with his head bowed, breath trailing behind him like smoke. Each step was an act of penance, each night a vow of endurance. His boots cracked at the seams. He wrapped his feet in linen torn from his spare shirt. Still, the cold reached him. The air in the mountains was clean, but without kindness. It did not smell of rot or fire or sweat. It had no memory. 3 days into the climb, he found a corpse. Half buried in snow, bent backward at the spine, the man had died with his eyes open, gazing upward. His hands still gripped a small wooden cross. His tongue protruded slightly from blue lips, as if the last thing he tried to do was pray. Corentin knelt beside him. He did not close the man's eyes. He had once believed that gesture sacred. Now he feared it might only be sentimental. Instead, he covered the corpse with pine branches. Then he walked on. At the highest part of the pass, where the sky felt close enough to crack, he found the monastery. Stone buildings huddled beneath a cliff, roofs layered in ice, windows dark. No bell tower, only silence. He knocked once. A monk opened the door without a word. Inside, the hearths burned low, the walls smelled of wet wool and smoke. The monks wore black robes, faces half hidden beneath hoods. None spoke unless spoken to. They moved as if sleepwalking. Only the abbot spoke, and even he did so rarely. "This is Saint Remigius' house," he told Corentin. "Pilgrims shelter here, when they can. Most don't reach us." Corentin slept on a cot stuffed with straw. For 3 days, he ate broth thickened with barley, and washed his feet in melted snow. The pain returned to his limbs as warmth did. He welcomed it. On the second morning, he heard bells. Not loud, not near, but distant, rising faintly from the valley like the echo of a forgotten prayer. He asked the abbot about them. "The bells ring every morning," the man said. At dawn, we ring them for the lost. Not just those who've died. Those who vanish. The ones never seen again. Corentin listened more carefully the next morning. 5 bells. 1 deep, 1 cracked, 3 small and hollow. They rang not in unison, but in call and answer, like voices speaking across a chasm too wide to cross. He stood at the window and imagined them, bodies buried beneath snow, their memories kept alive only by metal voices that would never know their names. They ring for the ones like me, Corentin said, though no one was near enough to hear it. On the 4th day, he prepared to leave. The monks gave him a small bundle of dried bread and apples. The abbot placed a silver token in his hand, a coin-sized medallion stamped with Saint Remigius' face, worn nearly smooth. It won't save you, the abbot said. But it may remind you who you are. Corentin nodded. The token was cold in his palm, and heavy in a way no relic should be. As he stepped out into the morning frost, the bells rang once more. He did not know if they rang for him, or if they were already mourning what he had not yet lost. By the time Corentin crossed the last ridge of the Apennines, winter had softened, but not forgiven. The snow no longer fell, yet clung in patches to the northward faces of stone, resisting the sun with the bitterness of memory. He descended slowly, limping. His joints no longer bent without complaint. His right foot had grown black at the nail, though he did not look closely. He told himself, pain means I'm still in the world. The valleys below were not green. They were grey. Ash coated the olive groves. Vineyards lay twisted and blackened. The villages smelled of wet soot, and in some places, the earth was scarred with lines where fire had crawled like a slow beast across the fields. He passed a burnt cart. Then a charred tree. Then an entire chapel collapsed into itself, its bell melted into the floor. At the edge of one such ruin, a boy threw stones at a wall and did not speak. When Corentin passed, the boy did not stop. The stones struck the wall and dropped like bones. The city, if it could still be called one, was a tangle of hollow buildings crouched in smoke. Genoa, or something like it. The names had begun to matter less. What remained of the place was soot, narrow streets black with damp, and people who moved like ghosts made flesh, slow, untrusting, eyes dulled by too much smoke, too much loss. He was taken in by a young priest. The man's cassock was clean but too large, as though inherited hastily. He spoke with nervous hope, the kind that flickers like a candle too near an open door. "You're a pilgrim?" the priest asked. Corentin nodded. "To Rome?" "I was." The priest hesitated. "There's a shrine nearby." "Or what's left of it?" "The relics were taken before the fires, but it's still a holy place." Corentin said nothing. That night, the priest prepared a meager meal, onions in wine, old bread soaked in oil. He spoke of saints. Of resurrection. Of fire as trial. His voice carried the fragile cadence of someone trying to believe his own words. Corentin listened, but his mind drifted. He remembered the way his wife used to hum while kneading dough. The way their child once laughed when his finger brushed the boy's cheek. Neither sound had returned to him in dreams. Only silence. The silence that deepened when the flames came. He had seen it before. Fire leaves noise in its wake. But then, when the shouting ends and the ashes cool, the real silence begins, the kind that speaks in the hollow of the chest, the kind that settles in the ribs like dust. In the middle of the night, the church caught fire. Whether from a candle, or some hand of anger, no one would ever know. Corentin woke to the scent of burning wood, the crackle of beams splitting in their hearts. Smoke poured through the nave. Statues of saints wept black tears. He dragged the priest, coughing, eyes red, through the sacristy and into the street. They stood watching it collapse. The crucifix inside had glowed, then gone dark. The priest fell to his knees, weeping. "Is he still in the smoke?" he asked. Corentin looked at the rising pillar of ash, tall as judgment. His voice came slowly, from somewhere too deep for words. "He was in my son's last breath. And then, nowhere." He no longer asked how many days had passed. The sun rose and set, though sometimes behind clouds thick as wool. The sky had changed color, no longer winter's white, nor spring's blue, but something pale and distant, like a faded page no longer meant to be read. South of the hills, past fields abandoned even by the crows, Corentin came upon a city he had never meant to find. It was not marked on the path. There were no signposts, no caravans, no toll gates or gossip. Only low stone walls and narrow alleys twisted upon themselves like a knot. He passed beneath a half-broken arch. Beyond it, silence, of a kind that felt older than speech. The city had no name. Or perhaps it had once, but time had worn it down until the letters crumbled in the mouths of the dead. It was not ruined, not exactly. The walls still stood, the towers still reached toward heaven, and the roads, though cracked, held the shape of order. But something was wrong in its design. There were no doors. Each building, homes, halls, even a chapel, had windows, arches, gates. But every doorway had been bricked shut. Stone on stone, mortar sealed and smoothed as if to erase the very concept of entrance. He wandered its streets without plan. His staff struck the flagstones in steady rhythm. The echo was strange, flat, absorbed by walls too thick with silence. He heard no footsteps but his own. No voices. No bells. Cats wandered freely, pale and thin, their eyes glowing in the dusk. A woman sat at a fountain, still as a statue, fingers moving through beads that no longer bore prayers. He asked no questions. There was no one to answer. That night, he slept beneath a broken colonnade. Rain began before dawn, not heavy, but cold, falling in slow, deliberate drops like a monk's pacing. It soaked into his cloak. He did not move. He dreamt of the road behind him, stretched out like a black ribbon over snow and ash and fire. Along it, he saw markers, not mileposts, but faces. Each one turned toward him with lips parted, not in speech, but in exhale. The moment before a word. The moment before forgetting. When he woke, his knees ached. His breath steamed in the grey light. The city had not changed. In the square, a child with bare feet drew circles in the dust. Round and round and round. The circles had no beginning. No end. Corentin approached a small shrine at the far edge of the city. It was carved into the wall itself, no door, only a shallow alcove. Inside, a candle had long since died. The saint's face was weathered into anonymity. But beneath it, someone had scratched a line in Latin. Non omnes qui erit perditus estimated. Not all who wander are lost. He stared at the words. He thought of Rome. Of the shrine he had once dreamed of. Of the bones beneath altars, the relics kissed by thousands of lips. He felt nothing. There was no great grief in him. Only a stillness so complete it felt holy. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the brass pilgrim's shell. With care, he placed it at the foot of the shrine. Not as an offering. Not as surrender. But as the only thing he still had that remembered his beginning. Then he walked back to the colonnade. And did not leave the city again. He never left the city without doors. Spring passed. Then summer. Then another winter, and another. Corentin remained. He did not build a home. There were no homes here, only shelters, corners of broken cloisters, dry chambers behind walls sealed from the world. He found a small garden behind a roofless house, where lavender grew wild in the cracks, and fig trees bent under their own age. There, he slept when it was warm. When it rained, he lay beneath the colonnade, listening to drops echo against stone like forgotten psalms. No one asked him why he stayed. No one ever had. From time to time, travelers wandered into the city, merchants with cracked carts, pilgrims turned around by plague or fear, men and women who spoke little and moved less. Some stayed a night. Some remained until they vanished. No one left. Corentin spoke only when spoken to. He helped dig graves when someone died, and cleaned the fountain when leaves clogged its mouth. His body grew thinner. His hair grayed. His silence thickened, but it was not empty. It was full, not with despair, but with something slower and heavier, like deep water. He never again uttered the name of his son. It was not forgotten. It was simply buried deeper than words. There are many ways to abandon a journey. Most are loud, through pain, fury, collapse. But Corentin's surrender was not a breaking. It was a soft extinguishing, like a flame that gutters after the oil runs dry. Years later, though no one counted years in the city, he carved 3 names into the base of a stone near the garden. His own. His wife's. And their sons'. Nothing more. He used no dates. No symbols. Just names, worn shallow by time. A child found the stone, long after Corentin died. Or perhaps long after he walked into the woods and simply did not return. The child could not read the letters, not fully. She traced them with her fingers, thinking they must belong to saints, or angels, or the first people who built the city. She asked an old woman who they were. The woman said, no one. Only a man who walked too far, and no longer wished to arrive. The child returned to the stone often. She placed petals on it in spring, snow in winter. She did not pray, she did not know how, but she sat there, listening to the wind. We often speak of pilgrimage as destination, as proof of devotion, as journey toward something holy. But some roads are not meant to end. Some prayers are not meant to be answered. And some pilgrims, like Corentin, discover that the silence at the heart of the world is not absence, but presence too vast for words. He did not find Rome. He did not bring back a relic. He did not return. But he bore witness. To loss. To silence. To the long, slow unfolding of a soul. And in a city no one remembers, among names no longer spoken, something remains, a stillness deeper than faith. A memory deeper than grief. A man once walked. He never arrived. And somehow, that was enough.